on June 11, 2009, also wrote that this provision, quote, being pushed by the auto industry is simply bad policy, that it's designed to provide Detroit one last windfall in selling off gas guzzlers currently sitting on dealers' lots because they're not a smart buy. This unrelated provision is an unwise use of taxpayers' hard-earned money and bad environmental policy. It doesn't belong in this bill, and I strongly disagree with its inclusion. A few more earmarks that I'd like to highlight. $2.2 billion in unrequested funding for 8 C-17 Globemaster cargo aircraft. Currently, we have either bought or ordered 30 more C-17 cargo aircraft than is the military requirement. And this is not a jobs program, as the backlog of C-17s is so great that Boeing will not begin building these 8 aircraft for another 3 to 5 years. While Secretary Gates called the C-17 a terrific aircraft, he stressed that the military users have more than necessary capacity for airlift over the next 10 years. These are, again, testimonies to the power of the military-industrial congressional complex in this Washington, D.C. An unholy alliance between manufacturers, members of Congress, and lobbyists brings these things about, my friends. $504 million in unrequested funding for 7 C-130 Hercules cargo aircraft. In testimony on May 14, 2009, Secretary Gates said, "We have over 200 C-130s in the Air National Guard that are uncommitted and available for use for any kind of domestic need. All I know is that I have a great deal of unused capacity in the C-130 fleet." That's what the Secretary of Defense says. So we're going to spend $504 million more for 7 C-130 Hercules cargo aircraft. $3.1 billion in unrequested funding for international operations and programs. The additional funding added by the House majority and agreed to in conference is to offset the $3.2 billion reduction recently made by the Congress to the base budget request. $49 million in unrequested funding for hurricane damage repairs to the Mississippi Army ammunition plant. This funding was added even though the Army advised the managers of this bill that there are no storm-related repairs required at the plant. So we're going to spend $49 million to repair a plant that doesn't need to be repaired, and that no valid military requirement exists for the funding. $186 million is provided above the President's request for lightweight howitzers built in Mississippi for the Marine Corps. The additional funding is not requested in the future years defense plan, nor was it on the 2009 or 2010 Marine Corps unfunded. In other words, the Marine Corps doesn't need it. The Department of Defense says it's not needed, but we are going to spend $186 million additionally for howitzers built in the state of Mississippi. $150 million is included for Air Force A-10 Warthog aircraft wing kits and installations. Davis Mountain Air Force Base is in my state of Arizona, and additional wing kits would be welcome. The additional funds were not requested by the administration, and I oppose this $150 million. It inruns the defense base realignment and closure BRAC process by prohibiting the Secretary of Defense from carrying out a 2005 BRAC decision to discontinue the Armed Forces Institute of Pathology. I was very disappointed that the House Democrats succeeded in their efforts to strip from the supplemental spending bill the detainee photo provision offered by Senators Lieberman and Graham. This provision would support the President's efforts to bar the release of photos of past detainee abuse, would help protect our troops from the inevitable recrimination that these photos would incite. Releasing the photos would not supply new information about the issue of detainee abuse, but rather expose evidence of alleged past wrongdoing and put our fighting men and women in greater danger. That's not my view. It's of our leading military commanders, including Generals David Petraeus and Ray Odierno. Both of these distinguished military leaders have stated that the release of these images could endanger the lives of U.S. soldiers. and make our counterinsurgency efforts in Iraq and Afghanistan more difficult. That's why I commend the leadership demonstrated by Senators Lieberman and Graham, both of whom have steadfastly demanded that this crucial provision be addressed now by the Congress. Their efforts culminated in the passage by unanimous consent of standalone legislation that will help prevent the release of these damaging images. So, there's other troubling aspects of detainee policy included in this supplemental bill. Provisions in this bill attempt to address detainee policy in a piecemeal way that fails to constitute a comprehensive plan for what to do with detainees at Guantanamo and those terrorist suspects captured off the battlefield in Afghanistan. It doesn't include the $80 million requested by President Obama to close Guantanamo. This is a serious rebuke by Congress and reflects a bipartisan backlash against the idea of announcing a date for the closure of Guantanamo while failing to provide a plan for what comes next. Well, as I said at the beginning of my remarks, Madam President, I ask unanimous consent that the supplemental earmarks and unrequested congressional add-ons be made part of the record at this time.
Without objection.
So, in what the American people believed was a time of change, the American people now should know that it's business as usual. A combination of lobbyists, industry, campaign contributions, unnecessary spending continues completely out of control. This was a piece of legislation that was supposed to fund the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. So now we add billions of dollars in things like cash for clunkers, unneeded and unnecessary and unwanted military equipment that are made in certain powerful members of Congress's home state. It's not good. Sooner or later, the American